Mr. Speaker, this Premier will promise just about anything to just about anyone to win a leadership or an election. Keeping those promises is another story, though, Mr. Speaker. After the Premier was elected leader of the PC Party, she said that she would consider removing Section 11.1 from Bill 44, which amended the Human Rights Code that prevents teachers from talking about religion or sexuality in the classroom. Mr. Speaker, Albertans are trying to understand what this Premier stands for. So let's get some clarity. Will the Premier commit to removing Section 11.1 from the Human Rights Code? And if not, why not?
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we've had a tremendously successful legislative session with respect to legislation that mattered to Albertans, and I'm very proud of the fact that we are making such good progress with respect to legislation around the Education Act. The Education Act, Mr. Speaker, which we know was part of incredible public debate before the election, during the election, and of course after the election, Mr. Speaker, we've ensured that that legislation reflects the balance of interests that Albertans need to have in order to ensure that students and parents and teachers all have the ability to learn appropriately, and we're very proud of that work, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Premier is very proud of not answering that question, too. Given that the Premier also promised to consider changes to the Human Rights Code that would legalize hate speech, will she admit that she's talking out of both sides of her mouth and pandering to the extremists within her own caucus and party?
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the work that needs to be undertaken with respect to comprehensive legislation around the balancing of rights might appear in things like the Education Act, Mr. Speaker. It may appear in the Human Rights Act. But the first thing we have to do, Mr. Speaker, and our Minister of Justice has spoken to this, is to ensure that we know exactly what the courts are saying with respect to that. There are a number of matters before the court at this time, Mr. Speaker, and it's important for those to be dealt with.
Honourable member.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, given that Albertans need to know what it is this PC government stands for, will the Premier show Albertans where she really stands on human rights by bringing forward an amendment to remove Section 11.1 from the Human Rights Code and do it in this session of the legislature?
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, during 28 days of a campaign, Albertans understood what a progressive Conservative Party
Here.
I am proud of this government's record and the members of our caucus individually, Mr. Speaker, who have a fundamental commitment to protecting the human rights of all Albertans. It was very clear during the election, Mr. Speaker, that we are the party that stood for those rights, that we can balance those interests. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why today, as government, we are able to introduce legislation that does exactly that.
You bet.